Want to welcome everybody. Hello, my name is Liz Zimdars. I'm the head of adult services here at the library. Thank you for coming out on this weird, rainy-ish, warm-ish November night to learn about Rosemaling. We are so excited to have Nancy Odalen here tonight. Nancy has been studying Rosemaling for over 20 years. This year was awarded the Westerheim Gold Medal, which is the highest achievement in the world of Rosemaling. She's basically the MVP. And is also serving as the Westerheim Artist in Residence this year, correct?
Right.
So please help me give Nancy a warm welcome. And
Thank you so much. I'm so glad that you were able to come and hear about kind of one of the passions of my life, and that's Rosemaling. The other one's my husband, who's back there, Roger, and he's a wood carver. So both of us are semi-retired. We can't seem to get away from working, and but we have a studio in our lower level, and he's wood carving, I'm Rosemaling, so it's makes for a very happy day, right? So I'm going to talk to you today about Rosemaling, the migration of a tradition. Maybe. Yeah, I got green.
okay, so yep, you should be able to.
Okay, so do I need to point it someplace special?
It should just go. Oops.
Oop. We didn't try that out.
Oh, good grief. All right. Pardon our technical difficulties. Doing what it's supposed to. Okay, here. There we go.
Okay, we're good.
Okay, we're good.
Just had to
Yep,
get
just
off
had to
the
wake it
main
up.
slide. Yep, there we go. So just a little bit of an overview. We're going to talk about Rosemaling in Norway first, where it started, how it's moved, traditionally how that art form moved from the eastern part of Norway to the western part of Norway, some of today's modern artists in Norway, and then we'll talk about how that art form came to the U.S. and take a look at some of what the Rosemalers today are doing. So Rosemaling, and just a little descriptive of what it is. It's a decorative painting on wood that uses stylized flowers, ornamentation, predominantly primary and secondary colors, scroll work, line work, and geometric elements, often with flowing patterns. There's landscapes, architectural elements, figure and portraits are also common. And many other decorative techniques were used in Rosemaling, and just kind of whatever looked good on a piece. You saw a lot of trunks that were done, dowry trunks. See a lot of that in the old work. But you also see a lot of what was traditionally painted in the churches. So a lot of that Rosemaling was done in the churches. And the Rosemaling done in churches were done by the guild painters. So in Oslo, which was the center, that's where all the guilds were, they actually learned, and it was traditionally men that were Rosemalers. So they learned that art form there, and then they would go out across Norway and paint in government buildings and churches, and then for also wealthy farmers, landowners as well. So Rosemaling, however, when they were taught in the guilds, they really looked at it as what was coming from Europe. So from Europe, you saw the styles of the Baroque, the Regency, and also the Rococo. That's what was coming into Norway at that time. And then the Norwegians put their own interpretation on exactly what that meant for the Norwegians. The name Rosemaling is strictly Norwegian. So if you think of, you hear that term applied, it's applied to something that came from Norway or is done in the tradition of the Norwegian rosemalers. So the European styles influenced many of the Norwegian painters, but as I said, they eventually took off and did their own thing. So what is these different styles? How do you define them? So the Baroque is characterized by ornate, flamboyant forms that aim to inspire awe. Artists at Rosemaling and it's now referred to Hallingdal and Agder were influenced by the Baroque style. Regency focuses on figures and portraits, and we'll see some of that. Usually in the religious works, you would see a lot of that. And Rococo is characterized by a lightness and elegance, an exuberant use of curving natural forms and ornamentation. So today you would see the Rococo style in Talmart. That would be a big influence. And I have some photographs because they really speak louder than words. So we're going to talk about Baroque. You can see the large, big center flowers, big heavy forms, big heavy scrolls. That's definitely the Baroque style. Again, some other of the Baroque, but a little bit lighter. So you see a little influence, especially in that one on the other side, of a little bit of the Talmart and a little bit finer scroll, not so much heavy, but still having those heavy center flowers. And again, some more examples of Baroque. I mean, we say Hallingdal, but some of these actually came perhaps from the valley of Agder. And that one over there is representative of that. Big crowns, big heavy pieces, very flamboyant. And then the large, this is a Hallingdal piece here, a large center flower. So Regency, here it is, either beautiful woman over there, probably her wedding, and then the religious figures, Adam and Eve. And it's throughout Rosemaling, whether it's in churches or even some of the trunks, you'll see some figures, even some birds and things that will be incorporated in there, so that's some of that Regency. So now we go to the Rococo. And I think traditionally, many people kind of gravitate to the Rococo style, which a lot of times is Talmart. It's just kind of flowing and just exuberant as well, and just so interesting. So some of the traditional Talmart style. This one over here, not so traditional, but still a little bit of that Rococo. And again, it's just amazing how they can take that style and just it creates such interesting and complicated designs that just pull you right in. And that's what, to me, that's what Rosemaling is about. It's when you walk in a room, you come right over to a piece because it's calling you, come here, look at me. And that's what a lot of these artists did. I think that's so wonderful. So by 1870 to 1880, Rosemaling had fallen out of favor in Norway. The Norwegians felt that Rosemaling was too rustic and old-fashioned to be found in their more fashionable homes of the time. There were a few artists that still did Rosemaling, but by the 1987, the only school in Norway for Rosemaling disbanded. So if you're not familiar with Norway, that you pick where you're going to go. If you're going to be a tradesperson or you're going to go on to school and be a doctor, you pick that early on when you're in school. And for some people, they pick the school for Rosemaling to go and do that. there's a number of artists that are very prominent in Norway and are still Rosemaling today. A couple of them actually came from that school, and that's Uni Marie and Tord Hellet Fatland. And they still carry on those old traditions, but they also put a little bit of a twist to it, so it's exciting to see what's coming out of Norway. Here in the US, we're very much traditionalists. We're looking at the old. Sometimes hard for us to really put the twists, and I'm going to show you some of their work that they're doing there. It's kind of, you know, it's what you want to see, I guess. So off on the one side is Uni Marie Lean. Her work is very traditional scrolls and flowers and elements like that, but she Rosemals with a very different color palette than what we're used to. She lives out on by one of the fjords, and she sees the sky and the sun and setting and rising, and that's where she gets her color palette from. She has a little house on these hilly rocks, and she has a studio where she paints, and she has a motorcycle that is all Rosemald and a car. And if I told you she had bright red hair, you would believe me. And she does. She's a fun person. So Tord Hellet Fatland is a little bit more on the traditional side as you see her work there. Mona Senthet Odalen, son, get that last son in. As I said, here's that Regency style coming through with a little bit of the bird, but still those scrolls. And again, on the Hesvik and the traditional Rococo style that I showed you before. Geir Katzel, very much that Rococo style. And then another one from Anna Hesvik. You can see that Rococo. So if you're in Norway, they will, if you're asking questions and saying, is this Rococo or is this Baroque, they will understand exactly what you mean. Here in the US, we've tried to define exactly where something came from. So here we'll be talking about things like, is that Hallingdal, or is that Telemark, or is that Gudbrandsdal, or is it this? And it comes from those valleys. So when the guild painters went out across Norway, they would run into people in those valleys, and all of a sudden they would be talking and probably having a little akavit and talking about Rosemaling, and they would borrow some of the designs that maybe the guild painters were doing, and they started incorporating in their work. And if you really look at the old and try and determine where something came from, it's very difficult, because you start seeing elements in that Rosemaling that comes from different valleys and different regions. So a lot of times when you look in the old books, wherever a piece ended up, if it ended up in Hallingdal Valley or if it ended up in Agder, they would say that that was an Agder piece. And it may not have necessarily been just that particular area, from that particular area, it just ended up there. Same way with the style that I have here on this table. That's called Rafilka, and it's from the very western coast of Norway. And it incorporates the Rococo, the Baroque, not Regency so much, but so Agder, Hallingdal, Telemark is what you'll find in the work that I do. And I read a book and they said, oh, it's got all these other styles in it, and then they added a few flowers and they called it Rafilka. So that's just interesting to trace where some things came from. So between 1836 and 1935, Wisconsin was a principal destination for people that came from Norway. By 1900, 25% of the Norwegians in the US lived in Wisconsin. And many treasured Rosemal pieces that left Norway during the migration ended up in their homes, in their attics, hidden away in corners, closets, and barns. As Norwegians became more prosperous, these treasures were reminders of the homeland, became less important. But during the Great Depression, the father of Rosemaling in America brought this art form back, and his name is Per Lysne. And Per Lysne is from Stoughton. He was a wagon painter at the Mont Wagon Works. He immigrated to Stoughton in 1907. He worked at the wagon as a wagon painter, and then during the Great Depression, when business slowed, he turned to his Rosemaling and to his roots. So if his skill was, it did very intricate work, and it was in a style from his home area, which was Oos. So years ago, you would see these large plates, and they were smorgasbord plates. Versagu was on it, and those were the plates that he painted, and they were distributed through, I think it was Marshall Fields. He also has a couple of pieces at 10 Chimneys as well. So it's always, usually you see it with a white background, rarely in other colors, but there have been some. 10 Chimneys is a historic building, and it was where the Lunt family lived, the movie actors from the silent pictures. Yeah, and it's in Genesee Depot, Wisconsin. So here's a photograph of Per Lysne and one of the wagons that he probably painted. And these are those smorgasbord plates. And then he also did some cabinets. This was from Vesterheim. In one of their kitchens, they had these cabinets that he had Rosemald. Ethel Qualheim is, I think, the grandlady of Rosemaling. She also is from Stoughton, Wisconsin, and played a key role in America. She was the premier Rosemaler in the United States. She started as a landscape artist, not a landscaper. And she was the first gold medalist at Vesterheim Norwegian Museum. She also received the St. Olav's Medal from the King of Norway in 1971. And in 1989, the National Endowment of the Arts. She received the National Heritage Fellowship. Ethel Qualheim Rosemald in all styles, and she interpreted designs from the old pieces from Norway during the period of 1750 to 1875. And here's a picture of Ethel and some of her work. Baroque, or Hallingdal, is that. And then she was also a prolific Rosemaler in the Rococo style, or Telmark. Thody, another individual from Stoughton. You can start seeing the importance of Stoughton with the revival of Rosemaling. She moved when she was in her 40s. She's not Norwegian. I put that in there for a really specific reason, because everyone thinks that if you're going to Rosemal, you have to be Norwegian, and you don't. And here she was, a gold medalist, and she was German. She developed her own style and technique for Rosemaling. She published a lot of Rosemaling books and designs and how-tos, and taught a lot of classes. She was awarded her gold medal in 1970, and she was considered the foremost instructor in Rosemaling at that time. So here's Thody. This is her style that she created. But what's really interesting is that's Rogaland. It comes from where my grandparents came from. And what you see on the tables is my interpretation of the Rosemaling from that area. We both studied the same old pieces. We have come up with two different ways of interpreting what we see in the old. And I think Vi did this for ease of instruction. This was her style. It was easier to teach. It was kind of 1, 2, 3, everybody does this, and really taught a lot of people. I learned the first pieces that I Rosemaled were this style. It's called, now we call it American Rogaland. So not to get it confused with what I do, which is more traditional from Norway. So I want to, you see all these VGMs, and Liz said something about I'm a gold medalist. So what does that mean? I don't know, how many people have been to Vesterheim in Decorah, Iowa? Excellent. If you haven't been there, it's just like a 3-hour drive over there through some beautiful country in Wisconsin. And they have a collection there of all kinds of treasures that the immigrants brought from Norway. And it's a wonderful place to go through their museum. They also have a folk art school there as well. Every year, they have a competition, and it's called the National Folk Art Competition. Right now, at first it was just Rosemaling. Now we have Rosemaling and weaving and knife making and wood carving and some ironworks as well. You have to create your own designs. They should be based upon the work from that you would find in Norway, the old work. And you are judged based on, have you accomplished that? It's not so much a judgment of if I'm better than someone else. It's more a judgment is, do I understand this art form? And am I truly delivering a piece that represents what I say I'm doing? So with that, you receive points. Normally, you're only allowed to enter 2 pieces at a time each year. And from that, there's probably maybe another 100 pieces that are being judged. So this is the best of the best from all over the US that come here for that exhibition and to be hopefully awarded points. So for a red ribbon, you get 3 points for, a blue, 3 points, a red 2, and a white ribbon is 3rd place, so you get 1 point. You need to accumulate 8 points over a period. Rare, since only 2 pieces, that you're getting your gold right away. And then after that, you're awarded the gold medal. So there's 151 artists from all disciplines that have ever received their gold medal, and that's from 1967 when this first started. 72 of the artists received their gold medal in Rosemaling. Rosemaling was the first the first one that was represented. 26 gold medal Rosemalers are from the state of Wisconsin, and 3 gold medal Rosemalers are from Stoughton. So I'm number 3. So I really feel very honored to be in that group. So just a comment from Ethel. The thrill of Rosemaling is learning. Each new teacher has ideas we've not thought of. Class members are always interesting and contribute bits of information, tricks of the trade, and new sources of material. And that's just true in every single class that I go to. Well, you know, there's a resurgence of that tradition. Like with anything else, things fall out of favor. So Rosemaling, we had in Wisconsin. Well, that's my next slide, but I'll just talk about this one a little bit. So Rosemaling fell out of favor, but now with people being interested in things like Ancestry.com and Family Tree and movies like Disney's Arendal, Frozen. All of those traditions and Norwegian culture and heritage is coming back. When I teach a class now, I always ask, why are you taking Rosemaling? Well, my grandma had it, or we had it in the home, or we're Norwegian and I want to learn more about it. So I think that's really good that we're trying to figure out where we came from. So the association that I belong to in Stoughton, called Wisconsin State Rosemaling, used to have over 300 members in the heyday. And then they just fell away, either stopped Rosemaling, got a little bit older, couldn't do it anymore. And so membership declined. There's a lot of organizations that were in Milwaukee and other places that have disbanded because people were no longer interested in Rosemaling. But I'm glad to say that because of all of the interest in having genealogy done and DNA tests done, that now it's coming back. I normally teach one beginning class each year, and I have started with maybe 10 students. Then I was up to 18 students. This past year I taught 2 classes because I had such a long waiting list to teach, for me to teach beginning Rosemaling. So it really is coming back, and our organizations are starting to grow again. And especially during COVID, a lot of people were trying to figure out what to do, and some of them went online and started taking Zoom classes to do Rosemaling. It's hard to do that, especially for a beginner, and I think I encourage people to come to my class first and get their hand involved. So today, the treasured items are once again coming out of the attic, coming out of the barns, and coming into our homes. So let's just look at some of the Rosemaling pieces created by artists today that are living and working in the US. So Jan Norstetter is from Verona, Wisconsin. Andrea Herkert is from Belleville area. Karen Nelson was born in Stoughton and then ended up moving to California. So that's her work. And Louise Bath is from Colorado. And then I brought some of my pieces, but also some photographs of my pieces as well. A kransakaka. So it's to carry your kransakaka around with you. I don't think they ever had that in Norway, but it's fun to have it here. And then another little trunk that I did as well. So as a Rosemaler, I continue to learn from the old works as I create the designs that sing to my soul. It is my true joy to share my passion, enthusiasm, and knowledge of Rosemaling with others. So I'm very pleased that I was invited here today to talk to you. But now I really want to answer your questions because I bet you're going to have some. And that's what makes my talk so interesting, is when I get questions from all of you. So thank you very much. I know people are going to have questions, so just ask me. Well, they do have their own style. The Swedish have a style as well. So different. When you look at it, I don't have a photograph of so different than Rosemaling, but so similar because it's a folk art, right? But they have a lot more people in there and houses, and they have these big, huge flowers, and with all the leaves and branches, and that's kind of always in the center of the piece. It's amazing. So there is a Swedish art. There is from Denmark. There is from Germany. If you look at some of the folk art from Germany, it looks very similar to what they have in Norway. I think the Norwegians just kind of really took it to a whole nother level. And being Norwegian, I studied that. There's a lot of information on it as far as photographs. And there also is for the Swedish as well. So Denmark, I honestly don't know if they have something, but I know Sweden does. So yeah, but the Swedish ones call it something different. Do you remember what that is? The Swedish, what do they call that? Dalmaling, yeah. So different name. Rosemaling is Norwegian, and then they have a different name for the Swedish. So.
I realized tonight that I don't leave home after dark often enough, because I was gonna bring something with me. We have two pieces of Rosemaling, and they're signed L.S. Lisna, which according to the internet is Per Lisna's daughter-in-law.
Mm-hmm.
And you didn't mention her, so yeah. And they are the kind of cream color background. We have a
Right.
smorgasbord platter and a bowl. And my husband knows nothing about these because he was a kid when they sat on the mantle in his house for his whole life, and it never occurred to us to ask.
Okay.
Now, you said that maybe they were sold in Gimbels or places like
So it was either Marshall Fields, and because it was so popular that he could not keep up with the production. So his daughter-in-law would actually help him, but it was his design that she Rosemalled. And so sometimes you will see where she signed it. Sometimes Pierre Liston you'll see his name on the back, and sometimes there will be nothing.
Her name is on the back of it too. We also have a bucket that looks like Rosemaling, but there's nothing on it, so I don't know that that's
Okay.
a real thing
Yeah.
or not. And I didn't know until maybe 10 or 15 years ago. I was in an antique mall and I saw one of these platters in a locked case with a card saying it was by the Lisna family, and it cost about $200. So the main thing I took home from that was to tell my children, don't sell this in a garage sale for $5. They don't give it to Goodwill. You did say they were mostly painted on the cream color backgrounds, which is what we have.
Right.
So I was thinking maybe when you said like Marshall Fields or somewhere, that might be how my mother-in-law bought these, because I couldn't imagine her going to Stoughton to some Norwegian thing. And my father-in-law was the Norwegian one, but he didn't really ever pay much attention to the history, whereas my mother-in-law paid a whole lot of attention to her English history that went way back. So I'm pleased to know these things that did it.
Well, I think Pierre Liston, that was his way to earn a living. He did not teach anybody how to Rosemall. He did it kind of in his alley garage, and Ethel Qualheim would walk by, and she would kind of look and say, "Oh, he's making money. Maybe I should try that," because she did support herself, and her family. So that's kind of where things started. They could see what Pierre Liston was doing, but then they went again back to the traditional, the Telmark or the Rococo and the Baroque. That's what they went back to. And then she, being a landscape artist, already had some of that ability. So yeah, those old Norwegians, they would paint those plates with lacquer paint that they would use to paint cars with. And I didn't know that until someone had told me, because I had gotten a plate that was painted and I was going to take it off, and you just can never take that paint off. You're stuck with it the way it is. So
The platter has this weird kind of aqua paint on the back of it. So maybe there's a reason for that.
I don't know. I don't know.
Does the woodcarver over here make wooden things that you paint?
My husband, he carves figures, so we don't we don't quite cross, although he helps me with sanding some of my pieces as I'm backgrounding them, so he helps me with that.
It does say that like Carol Lisbeth for his business found other local woodworkers to create the plates and the bowls and stuff. So,
Right.
so they spread the wealth around, sort of.
That's a good thing. That's a good thing. Any other questions? Yes?
I'm kind of interested in the part about the art for you. When I look at your pieces, I guess I was reading a little before coming and read about how you pull colors that express like part of you.
Yes.
Where you're from.
So
I'm interested in hearing more about that.
I think the palette that we use is our colors, and it's really hard to determine what the old colors look like, because what we're doing is we're seeing colors that were created from the actual minerals with linseed oil. That's what they did. And so the colors changed with the artist. And now, how long do some of them truly last and have their brilliance after maybe 100 or 200 years? We're very fortunate as modern day artists to be able to call Dick Blick and get tubes of paint. Although it's more and more difficult to get acrylic paint, don't ask me why. For backgrounding, that's what I use. So my palette comes traditionally, you would see a Rosemaling piece to have red, green, yellow, blue, and then all the variations, so there'd be 3 values of that color, and then white and black would also be in there as well. And I'm not going to talk about Oos, which is what Pierre Lisna did, and he uses more colors that are lighter, pinks and light greens. That's part of that style from the Netherlands. So that's a little bit different. I went to the museum in Stavanger, and just looking around Stavanger is where I'm going, oh, that's this color and that's this color. And so that's where I kind of draw from that, but also what I've seen as well. So I pretty much have a set palette that I use, at least for the style that I'm painting that comes from my grandparents' area. I'm going to be doing another style which comes from further north, and that one's from Romsdal, and a little bit different palette. So I'll be working on that for the next year and a half, getting all of that. So we'll see where that comes out. A little bit more blue. I haven't been a very blue fan, as you can see. I'm red, green, and yellow. That's me. So yeah, but I think each artist develops their own palette, and it's from what we see. Although if you looked at some of the early trunks that I had the advantage of seeing, they used very bright yellows, and I tried using that on a piece, and us modern day artists weren't too happy with it. But it was cadmium yellow light. It's pretty bright. So, but they did have it. They had bright yellows and bright reds. So I can just imagine what those pieces look like when they were freshly painted. So kind of interesting. Yeah, thank you for that.
Did you create a design on paper and then?
Yeah.
And then do the painting
So I'm pulling.
by looking at?
Yeah, so I have tracing paper, and usually what I'll do is I'll start off with a piece, and I'll just lay that tracing paper and kind of cut it to where it is. So I go through as many as 6 or 7 different iterations of that, and I'm always painting on tag board, masonite, and trying it out, because it's not a matter of just creating the design, but it's a matter of also deciding where the colors should go, how the flowers should flow out of something. And when you're starting to create a design, it's kind of a rough draft. And so maybe you haven't opened up the V shape so you could get flowers to come out of there correctly. And then you find out that you're bumping into the side, so maybe you have to shrink things down. So everybody says, well, how long does it take you to do that piece? Well, it may take me a month or two to just create the design and keep testing it. And then when I actually put it on the piece, I change everything again, because you never know how it's going to flow until you actually are painting on that wood. So things start changing, not dramatically, but they do. So each one is kind of just an invested love that comes from here and into that piece. It just becomes a part of who I am. But I'm pulling from some of the old work. Maybe I like a flower, and maybe I like this scroll, or maybe I like this element, and trying to get that all together is just one. For me, it works very well.
Is it all done freehand? It's not like stencil?
So I put in the main scrolls because my design is a balanced design with the refilka. So there's it's symmetrical. So I want to make sure that I'm getting that in the right area. And then everything else, so maybe the scrolls I'll put in. I usually put a circle for where I want a flower, but I never know where that flower is going to end up, because I never know how, when I finally paint it on a piece, that scroll ends up, because they get fatter sometimes a little thinner. I never know. All the detail on that scroll, all the teardrops, all the line work, that all comes freehand. I'm not like they used to put a line here and a line here, figure out where the center was, and started to paint. I don't do that yet. Although I did it on the purse that I did, so, yeah.
Excuse me, sort of building on the question, I'm like, just thinking, like, even in your beginner classes, like, is there a fundamental, like,
Yeah.
what's an example of a fundamental sort of skill, or
Well, you're just so lucky. I'm going to have a beginning class at the end of March. So what we start with is the basic strokes, because there's some basic things that we need to all learn. We need our hand and our arm to understand that muscle memory to do scrolls, and there's C strokes. They're more shaped like an egg than a C, though. It's not shaped like this. It's more shaped like an egg. It comes down. So we do these C strokes, and then we do S strokes. So you'll see a C stroke, and you'll see an S stroke come off of it. Typical. That's what you would see in most every style. Sometimes you'll just see C's around, but those S's are there. In every stroke that we take, whether we're painting a flower, painting a scroll, we're painting in C and S strokes. That really gives it the flow that you want to have. Same way with your liner brush. You want to do those nice thin lines. Everything is a C stroke or an S stroke. What do I teach? I start you off with strokes. For a whole morning, all you're doing is stroke work, because you're starting to learn the basics. And then I have a design that you actually transfer onto a piece of masonite, and then I teach you how to paint it. But it's all C and S strokes. And by the end of the day, well, that day and the next day, you will all have a design completed after the second day. And they're beautiful. There isn't, Raj will attest, every single class I'm going, they're the best class ever. And he says, you say that to everyone. And I go, yes, but they are. This one is really good. But they are. They're all good because they walk out of there laughing and smiling and feeling comfortable. That's what this is all about. Not everyone is going to desire to go through the process of being a gold medalist. But what I want you to do is to be happy with what you're doing and enjoy meeting people that become your lifelong friend. That you're enjoying something, you have something in common, and it's absolutely a pleasure to do. I want to try and take the stress out because so many people, when they first started, I've heard horror stories of them doing leaves for 6 months. And it's like, no, that isn't what it's about. It's about kind of understanding and enjoying it, having fun with it. So I do have a class. You can take my card. Send me an email. I'll send you the form. It's 2 days, Saturday and Sunday. So, yeah.
I just want
Elaine.
to say Andrea Herbert has a couple of wonderful instructional books out there. I mean, she just takes you from the way beginning to make your scrolls and your seeds and your flowers, and they're just fantastic if you ever have a chance to get a hold of them.
Right. But it's about also, I'm going to say that's great to go on with, and I encourage people to do that, to take classes from other artists as well.
Yes.
But learning the basic on just how to load your brush and how to turn it, because all of a sudden your thumb has to get in the way and help you turn to get around. Just learning those few techniques will make an entire difference. But there's also was a book by Arnseth, I think, Arnseth, that he did a book and he had scrolls and everything. But I thought he did lots of books that talked about how to paint Rosemaling flower and things. So there's lots of things that you can learn. Yeah. Hard to self-teach unless you're used to working in oils. Then it's a little different. We work on brushes this size, this long, about that long. I've had people come to my class, they say, oh yeah, I've got brushes, I don't need yours. And they bring in this long because they're used to be, it's for landscape, they can stand back. We don't need that, we have to stand closer to Rosemall, so, yeah. Questions? Yes? So, Vesterheim Norwegian American Museum in Decorah, Iowa. Luther College is there. Their museum is around 3 floors, just packed full of old homes that are like right inside the museum that shows how the Norwegians live. They also have other homes on the property that gives you a sense of what it was like to live in a Norwegian constructed home here in the US when they first immigrated. Just lots of other things. They also have a folk art school where I've taken classes, Raj has taken classes, a lot of people have. It's a wonderful place.
There's a nice, the Heritage Center in Stoughton is really nice too.
The Heritage Center in Stoughton, they focus mainly on the immigration story. So they do have some pieces of Rosemaling there and wood carving and talk a little bit about the history as well. So you could start off there and then head over to Decorah. Beautiful, beautiful ride over there. So, yeah. So that's a Kransekake box. So Kransekake is made of almond, egg white, and powdered sugar. That's it. Ground almonds, egg white, powdered sugar. And you roll it and you have tins that are round and you put the dough in there and you bake it and then you start stacking it up. So the cake, depends on how many rounds you want to do. The cake is about this, and it comes up in that triangular shape. So they use royal icing to ice each one of those round pieces, and then they decorate it with Norwegian flags, a big bow on the top. And what is it used for? Celebrations, weddings. Traditional is that the bride and groom would lift the top, and how many rings came off, that's how many children they would have. So it's like a cookie. It's not a cake. It's like a cookie. And it's nice and chewy and soft and wonderful. Yeah.
One more. Have you ever been to Norway?
Yes. We've been there 3 times. Yeah.
Anything that lasted for some inspiration?
It's the most amazing place ever. The fjords and the mountains and the water and just the tradition that's there is it's really amazing. Plus everybody speaks English there, so that helps a lot. Transportation is unbelievably good because it's not just train. You go by ferry, you go by speedboat. Nobody really, you wouldn't drive across the mountain range necessarily in a car. So you would take a train through lots of tunnels and stuff. So I was there on 2 bus tours with our Sons of Norway group, of course. And then Raj and I went by ourselves. We had 2 foreign exchange students that came and lived with us at different times, and so we were meeting one of them, and so got to see where she was living and now going to school, and so it was a good experience. Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, 3 questions, but I don't want to hog.
That's okay.
Kind of off of that, the question about your experience in Norway. I remember in reading the description of this talk tonight, there was a couple mentions of Stavanger, and I just wondered what your connection is.
So my grandparents both came from Stavanger. My grandmother, and see, my dad was the youngest of the family, so he really didn't get the story, right? And I think guys, sorry guys, don't always, it's the ladies that are questioning. She came to the US by herself at 23. And I think she was meeting her dad, who was already here in Illinois, working on the canal in southern Illinois. So you're starting to piece things together. My grandfather, however, his family my great-grandfather was a captain of a ship. My grandfather worked on a ship. So adventurous as he was, he decided to sail around the world. 1.5 times. I used to think it was twice, but I was corrected by my cousin who said, no, he jumped ship in Australia. And he made his way to the US, and it's very hard to trace where he came in, but I know that he worked on the Great Lakes, and he fished on the Great Lakes. And then he opened a fish mart in Chicago, and he smoked fish. So in one of the census, they asked what his occupation was, and his occupation was a fish smoker. That's what it was. But he had his own truck, vehicle with his name, and in Chicago, they only had 5 digits for the phone number. So a long time ago. So I think he sold out of his truck. So they met here in the US, but my grandparents knew each other in Norway because their farms were pretty close. They both were confirmed and christened in the same church in Stavanger. So that's my history. Yeah.
I also wondered if you have a background in the arts or
I'm an accountant.
something.
Go figure that. Everybody says, oh, I can't do that. Yeah, I'm an accountant, I'm not supposed to, but there's something there that when you fall in love with an art form, if you're dedicated to it, you can be successful as you want to be, right? Okay, third question.
Oh, it's kind of an antiques roadshow type thing. I brought a picture on my phone of an old, really old table that I got at a flea market many, many years ago.
Okay.
And it has some Rosemaling on the top. I don't know, it looks very rustic to me, and I've always loved the steel, but I mean, we can do this after.
Yeah, why don't
I
we
would
do
love
that? In case somebody has a question. Yeah, that'd be great. Anybody else? So, you do.
Do you dream of these? Like, cause I know sometimes when I do things that it comes back to you in your dreams, and do you imagine things like?
There's many times when I have a block and I go, that's it for the day, I can't paint, and then I'll be laying in bed or in the morning, just before you start waking up, how you start figuring something out.
Yeah.
And then I can't wait to get downstairs and try it. But yes, I most days when I'm working on a piece, I'm constantly if you saw my studio, there's a ton of old books with old work in it, and trunks and bowls and ale bowls, all kinds of things. And I'm always paging through there. And if you looked at my books, there's notes, there's slivers of paper in there and little note, like, oh, this would be good with this or that. And then every time I go through that, and I'm looking for ideas. You never know where one's going to pop out at you. And then it's just like the flower on this. Well, it's interesting because everybody says, oh, that looks like an owl. I guess I never saw that until somebody brought it out. But it was one little tiny flower on one design, and I went, okay, I like that one. And then it became much more on this design. I put it every place. So I do use a very bright red when I'm doing this style, because I think that would have been traditional. So, and fellas like bright red. So I've had, a wife go by and not say too much, and then the husband's going, no, come look at this. So that's what kind of brings people in, is some of that color as well, okay?
You do like the framework and then you do the detail later?
Yes, and so I do wet on wet technique, so I can't come back a day later, and because it will have a different effect, because your paint underneath has already started drying. So if you put paint on top of it, it all of a sudden just stands out like crazy. So with wet on wet, it kind of sinks in and becomes a softer version. And so I finish sections at a time. Okay?
What is that box?
This is a lunchbox.
Oh, thank you.
This is a Tina. Okay, well, maybe they wouldn't have had a painted one, but they would have had a wood one, and they would have taken it out to the field with them or wherever they were fishing, and they would have had little boxes inside here that would have held their lunch. So that's what a Tina is.
For crumbs.
Oh, yeah, no. So this is, I won't take it off of this one, I'll take it on this one. These are keys. That's what locks the mechanism. So you would take the keys out, and then the top would come off. So this is a Cape-sized Tina. Would they have this in Norway? No. But they would have had a Tina. And would it have been this large? I don't know. But this locks everything in.
Does somebody in Stoughton make those?
No, I actually have a gentleman that's up in Coon Valley, Wisconsin. And he makes all the Tinas. He made the Kransekaka box as well. So he's my go-to guy for, he better not ever retire. At least before I do. Okay. I hope that you enjoyed and that you learned more about Rosemaling and that you're excited about it and that you want to come join me for a class. That would be great. So, good.